Hello, and welcome to this ANSYS Space Claim tutorial on using copy and paste along with the merge tool in order to modify an STL or other types of mesh files. If you haven't already, go ahead and go to File, Open, browse to the directory where you downloaded the file, and this one happens to be an STL file, so you won't see any file initially, but if you go to the file filter in the bottom right, you could either choose all files or STL files, and then the plastic molded STL file will show up and you could go ahead and open that. Now here in the tree, we just have a single mesh body that is common when opening up STL files. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how we can use copy and paste to make some modifications to it. Now, it's always a good idea to do a check mesh on the part. This one happens to have no problems, but we do have a tutorial on how to fix the problems that show up if there are any. But I'm going to go ahead and escape out of the check mesh tool and explain what we're going to do here today. We're going to take a look at copying and pasting individual objects like this standoff here. We'll take a look at copying and pasting just some individual faces, say on the side of one of these ribs. We're going to add a round to this area in here by copying and pasting some geometry and turning it into a regular solid. And last but not least, we're going to remove an area that isn't quite easy to fill in, where the holes tool doesn't quite do the job we want after deleting some faces, and we'll take a look at copying and pasting some edges and see how we can work with those. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take one of these standoffs here and we're going to add another one somewhere else. Now the first thing we need to do is select all the facets on one of these standoffs. Now in the bottom left, my drag select is set to box. That's the default. And if I drag left to right, it'll select anything in the box. And if I drag right to left, it selects anything the box touches. So right to left is a little too much here. I'm going to click here in white space to clear my selection and do a left to right box select. Now, if I go ahead and spin around and see what was actually selected, you'll see that not all of the faces were selected. Now, there's a reason for this and an easy way to change it. If we take a look at the selection filter just to the left of the drag select menu, you'll see that under face selection, there's something called automatic visible and through. And automatic tries to guess what faces you're trying to select, but sometimes it doesn't select the hidden ones. Here, if we go ahead and change that to through, and then do a left to right box select around this, notice that it selects all of the facets, whether we can see them or not. Now with all of these selected, if I wanted to delete it, I could always do right click and cut, and that would remove it from the model. But I can also do a copy, and that'll put a copy of it on our clipboard. So I'm going to do that. I could also do Control C, just like in Office. Now that that's on my clipboard, I want to paste it back in, and I could either do a right click paste or Control V, again, just like in Office. Now it puts it back in the same exact location it started in, so let's go ahead and uncheck the first one to see what we've got here. And we can see that it copied and pasted all the faces I had selected, but if we spin around to the bottom, we can see this is open here. Now it doesn't hurt to use the autofix tool and click on our mesh, and notice that it properly puts the correct hole in the middle, and it goes ahead and closes off the bottom here. Now, one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to escape out of the autofix tool, select my second design mesh here, and I'm just going to go to the display tab and change the color just so we can tell the differences here. Now I'm going to go ahead and recheck the first one in the tree, and we can see that those are overlapping here. And in my design tab, I'm going to use the move tool, and I'm going to select the entire mesh body here in the tree, and you'll see that I could use the move tool to either translate it in one direction just by selecting that arrow and then dragging anywhere. But also if I hold down the Alt key, notice that a little wedge appears in the center, and I could freely drag it around in any two directions at the same time. So maybe I want to put it somewhere over here. Now, it's hard to tell here whether or not there's any sort of gap underneath the bottom to our original solid. So it doesn't hurt to extend that down a little bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and hide the main body. And what I could do is I could double click on the bottom here to select all of these faces and either use the move or the pull tool to extend these down some amount. And it's always a good idea to bring back the original body and just make sure that we didn't extend through the part. And if I click in white space to deselect those faces, we can see that in fact I did not extend all the way through. But here, if I hover or select any one of these facets, we could see that that facet goes down into the body, which means we'll get a nice, smooth, clean merge. So let's go ahead and go back to our Facets tab, turn on the Merge tool. We select either of these meshes first, and then the other one second, and it goes ahead and merges them together, and we can see the facets have been adjusted in order to be able to connect all of these properly. And you'll also notice that if I select one of these facets that did extend all the way in, it's been trimmed up. So typically we don't see any self-intersections after a merge, but it doesn't hurt to do a check mesh. Again, no geometry problems have been found. Let's go ahead and escape out of the check mesh tool, and let's take a look at another thing that we can copy and paste. So one thing we may want to do is put in another rip here, and depending on how many facets there are around here, sometimes it can be hard to do a box select that doesn't get us too much. But one thing that can be very useful is just to select one side of something with a constant thickness. So here, if I double click on this facet, notice that it selects all the facets that are near tangent or planar. And if I copy, I'll do a right click copy and a right click paste. Again, you can do Control C and Control V. Notice that if we hide the main body in the tree, just those facets come in as a surface mesh. Now I'm going to go and show that again, and I'm going to go to my Design tab and turn on the Move tool, and I'm going to select the mesh body here. And at first, the move handle isn't really oriented in the direction we want. So we could hold down the Alt key or use this tool guide right here, the Move Direction tool guide. And you'll notice that as I hover over things, you get a preview of the direction. So I could select this face, it'll make it perpendicular to that face. I can select an edge, it'll align it to that edge. Now with that mesh body selected here, I can go ahead and move it to a new position. Now, in order to thicken this into something that we can actually merge into the solid, we need to convert this part of the mesh to a regular solid body. Now, in this case, it'll really be a surface body, but it'll go from a faceted design to the B-rep solid type modeling that SpaceClaim is usually used for. Now, to do this, what you do is you right-click on the mesh either in the design window, or you can also do it in the tree on the left. And you want to go to Convert to Solid, and you have two options, to merge faces and to not to merge. The only faces that will merge are ones that are in the same plane, and all of these are in the same plane. So here we're going to use the Merge Faces option, and now you can see that we have one single surface. Now with this type of surface, I can use the Pull tool in order to thicken it and turn it into a solid body. Now if we bring the mesh back, it looks like it's nice and aligned and in the right position, but we really don't know if the faces along the bottom here are intersecting, that there's a gap, because of the fact that we moved it around to another location. And what we could always do, depending on if we want to put it over here or even somewhere on the side, is we could use the Move tool with some of the more advanced commands. I'm going to change that direction using the Alt key to here. And I could always translate this over here. I could drag the center of the Move tool to a new location, and I want to orient the Move tool to this edge. And I could always take the Move tool's one of the rotational arrows and rotate this to another orientation. So you'll see that we can take this and move it to a number of different positions depending on exactly where we want this. And the key thing is that we want it to intersect or interfere enough with the existing part. Now, to do this, we have a few options. We could take the entire body and move it up or down so it's into the assembly. Another thing we can do is grab some of the faces, say here with a box select, and just go ahead and use the Move tool to extend them down. So it's always a good idea just to make sure that you have adequate interference between the different bodies. And maybe we don't want this as tall, so we could always make whatever modifications we want to it, even using the Up To command to snap this to some other geometry in the model. If you have any questions on the Move tool, we do have a Move tool tutorial found on our webpage as well. But now we can go back to the Facets tab and use the Merge tool to merge this the solid into our mesh, giving us one single mesh body. Next, let's take a look at how we can add some rounds to our model. So I'm going to escape out of the merge tool, and I'm going to double click one of the faces here. Where I want to add a round is on this edge here. Maybe the part is breaking. We want to strengthen it up a little bit. So I'm going to double click on one of these faces here, copy and paste again, and then hide the original mesh body. So here, just like on the rib we copy and pasted, we now have a set of facets that are open, and we'll go ahead and right click, convert to solid, and merge those together. Now, one thing that this surface has is a bunch of individual straight edges where the curves are, and this could make it a little more difficult to work with. So we're going to go ahead and replace that with some actual arcs. So to do this, we want to select the face of the surface here. And in our design tab, we want to go into sketch mode. And by going into sketch mode through this planar surface, it turns the edges of the surface back into curves. And you can see the individual lines that we have here. In our repair tab, in the fix curves group, we have a fit curves tool. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to box select all of the curves that we have, and I'm going to turn on fit curves. And each red dot represents a node, or where one curve ends and the next curve starts. And the curves can be a combination of lines, arcs, and splines. And there's also an option to try to correct tangency if the tangencies are off a little bit. And there is a slider here. Notice that as we turn this up and down, the number of nodes can decrease or increase. They'll also shift around. You'll notice with a much bigger tolerance, it's not fitting quite as closely. But if we go ahead and slide this back closer to 0, we will see them connect up and be much closer to the original data. So here I've brought it down to a value of 0.023, and we can see the tangency markers right there. And we'll go ahead and click the check mark. And now what we want to do is go back to 3D. And when we go back to 3D, it'll automatically turn this back into a surface. Now what I want to do is I want to take my pull tool here, and I'm going to take this face that we have, and I just want to make sure I'm pulling it in the right direction. And I just want to pull it down a little bit to create a solid from that surface that we have. So we could see here that if I hide the mesh, we have a real solid representing part of this flange right here. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to create this wall here. Now we could copy and paste and thicken and do something similar to what we did on the bottom, but there's a much cleaner way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double click either this edge down here, or maybe up here, or maybe this edge down here. Double clicking will give us a selection of this tangent loop. If it doesn't select those, you can also click one, hold down shift, and click one on the other end, and it'll pick everything in between. Now the default when I pull on an edge is to create a round, but we don't want to do that, so I'm going to hit escape to cancel. Over here in the options, we have something called extrude edge, and this allows you to either extrude a surface off this edge downward or inward. And I'm going to choose the inward direction and drag this in a little bit, and you can see it offset that surface. Now we don't want to do that too far, and we don't need to. We just want to do it, say, 1 millimeter. And then select that surface there and drag it up to thicken it into a solid. And we can see that we have one solid block now. And just to make sure that we didn't make that too big, I'm going to show the mesh again in the tree, and we can see that nice overlap here. By the way, this could be one way to reverse engineer this mesh back into a real solid by extracting surfaces, converting them to a regular solid, fixing the curves by doing a curve fit, and then pull them into a solid. But the last thing we want to do here is we want to add a round. So I'm going to double click here. That selects the tangent loop of rounds going along this edge here. And I'm going to use the round option, and I'm going to drag to put that round on. And I could always type in a value. Say I want this to be exactly 2 millimeters or 1 millimeter, for example. And if we show our mesh again, we can see that round in the correct location that we want. And now it's just a matter of using the Facets tab and the Merge tool to select our mesh and select our solid that we just created. And now it's gone ahead and merged that in. And if I escape out of the merge tool, we can actually see that round created all along the length of this edge. So you can create rounds by extracting some of the information and geometry from the model, converting it to a solid, create the round, and merge it all back together. Last but not least on this model is copying and pasting edges. Here's an area that we want to remove, and while we could attempt to select all these faces, delete them, and maybe try to auto fix or use the holes tool, sometimes the geometry is a little too complex to do that. So I want to show the ability to select some edges, because really to fill this in here, all we're trying to do is extend this over to here and down, and then same thing here, extend this edge to here and then downward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to control select these 4 edges here. And I'm going to copy and paste, Control C, Control V, or copy and paste. And if I go ahead and hide our mesh, we can see some curves that have been created. Now I want to create a surface from one curve to here, and then another surface from this curve to this one. So to do that, in our Design tab, right in the middle, we have a Blend tool. Now there are additional tutorials on Blend found on the Basics page. But what you do for this is you just select one, hold the Control key, and select the other. It creates or previews that surface in between the 2 edges, and you could either hit the check mark or enter on your keyboard. And we'll do the same thing here, Control select one and the other, and hit the check mark to complete. And what we can see here is the top faces created. Now next I'm going to go ahead and grab my pull tool, select one of these 2 faces and pull it down, making sure I go all the way down into the part. We'll grab the other one and do the same thing here. Now we could just merge these together as is, but we're not really sure if we matched up perfectly. And we can see here that we're at the right area, we're nice and smooth at this corner, but not down here. And that usually means that these interfaces have been drafted. So that's an easy thing to do. With the pull tool, you simply select the face you want to draft, and there's a tool guide called draft. Again, there are tutorials on the pull tool guides that go into draft in a little more detail. But you then select the face you want to draft about. You'll see an angle there, and you could either drag dynamically or type in a value. And if we drag to 1 degree and let go and hit escape, it seems to be nice and flush, especially when we see this kind of overlap of the green and purple faces. So we can confirm that that was drafted to 1 degree. We could see the same problem here. So we'll select that face, use the draft tool guide to select this face to draft about, and we'll just type in 1 this time. And here it's nice and smooth, and then we just need to do that 1 more time. We can see the little gap over here. So this is the face we want to draft. Use the draft tool guide to pick the face we want to draft about and simply type in 1. And if I hit escape, it looks nice and flush. And now that we've recreated some solid geometry using blend and pull and draft, we could go back to the facets tab and use the merge tool to join these back together. Now we have that nice clean pocket filled in, and this can be used in a variety of areas, but just want you to understand that you can select edges and copy and paste them. One tip, if you want to select a loop of internal edges, you want to hold down the shift key while you double click, and now you can see that loop of edges has been created that can be copied and pasted into curves and used to recreate some geometry to merge back into the design. Thanks for watching and have a great day.